Welcome to the podcast. This is the final episode of Creative X Community, and we are in Penticton, British Columbia with Chris Royal, proprietor, key holder, it says on your LinkedIn, and chief cook and bottle washer at Chulo Tapas Bar and Tratto Pizzeria. Yeah. You've got two of the most hip places in town. Definitely have a creative flair to them. So I think it fits in nicely to kind of end this little series for me here with you, just chatting about restaurants and food and design and business and all that stuff.
Yeah.
First of all, like, you came from Vancouver. How did you end up in Penticton, and what sort of inspired you to open your first restaurant?
I worked for a company in Vancouver that was wonderful, and they're really great people. But there was a certain limit as to what I could do there, and I'd reached it fairly quickly. I was there for about 7 years. And my wife and I realized that if we wanted to do anything else, we had to do it on our own. And we were rapidly realizing that Vancouver was pretty saturated. So we looked around and we checked out everywhere. We looked everywhere from Halifax to Toronto, which is where I'm from, to Montreal, to Hamilton, Ontario as an option, to Kelowna. That was a no for her. It wasn't a no for me necessarily, but it was definitely a no for her. We looked at Peachland and Summerland. Those were both no. We checked out a Soyuz very seriously, and then went there in March, and that was a no. And then we came to Penticton, and we were like, it's a bit small. She's never lived in a smaller town. I grew up in one. I grew up in a town of like 900. And then I went to high school in Fredericton, which is about the size of Penticton, about 50,000. So for me, it wasn't as big a shock, but it was for her. And we came here because we found a house that we liked. And then we thought, well, we'll work out the rest of it later. And when we arrived here, my biggest, my biggest shock was that the restaurants were all at wineries. And there was no restaurants really in Penticton of any significant note. Like, most of them were much older restaurants. They had sort of seen their day in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but they weren't really, there's nothing sort of new or opening up. There's no cafe. There's no place to get coffee, really. And I was shocked by that, considering it's a food bowl. And so we thought, well, there's opportunity, and let's do pizza and pasta and see what we can come up with. And created a business plan that was flexible. The flexibility came in what kind of space we were going to manage to get. And when we got the Tratto space, we realized that we couldn't do the full restaurant. We could only do the pizza side of it. So we went with that business plan. And that's how Tratto was kind of born. And it was born out of frustration. Like, it was the last ditch. Like, I really was at my wit's end. We were about to even move at that point. And I called a realtor that I knew and said, can you please just find out about the space? I don't want to talk to a human. I've talked to enough humans. You talk to them and find out whether they're what they want, what's going on there. And she called me right back and said, you have your business plan, right? And I said, yeah. She said, can you send it to me? And I said, sure. And she said, can I give it to them? And I said, yeah. And I did. And I got a call a few minutes later saying, these people want to talk to you. And I said, oh, okay. And then and then she told me who they were. And I was like, oh, that was completely unexpected, that it was also Vancouverites. And that they owned kind of one of the greatest Neapolitan pizzerias in Canada at Via Tevere. And I was like, oh. So we met on or around April Fool's Day, spring of 2019. And I think my beard was even longer than I must have looked like a wild man to them. But they shook hands with me, and we opened the restaurant 6 months later. Like, it was so fast after that. Let's go. They were like, let's go. The design elements came from me based on the structure of the building. And I looked at it and I said, it's got to be industrial. We can't make it look like anything else. So this is what we're going to do. And then Dom, my partner, came up with the cocktail, the bar being all concrete, which I resisted at first because I wanted a warmer feel to the place. But he goes, no, it's going to be great. I was like, okay. And so we did that. I built everything else out of plywood, and we built the lights out of the former second story floor. That was the flooring for the second story. So the big long lights that we have with all the big huge bulbs, those were built out of that. And our electrician helped do that. I sanded them all down and built them, and then he wired them, and then we put them up together. And it was a crazy kind of a come together. And I think Trado was really lightning in a bottle. We were at the right place at the right time. We had a lot of people talking about it. I'm fairly well known in the wine industry because of my experience in Vancouver. They have family here. My partners have family here. So there was a lot of talk. So when it opened up and we were relatively okay, it did well. And it's hard to repeat that. It's hard to repeat that. And when I found out we weren't going to open until November, I was like, ooh. But we had a really busy Christmas and a really busy January, February until COVID shut us down. And which in retrospect kind of saved us a little bit. We were losing half of our staff to summer jobs. And we were on a serious ascension at that time. And I was very concerned in around March whether or not we'd be able to keep up with the summer. And COVID took care of that for us.
If there was ever a silver lining to be had, I guess
for
it was,
sure.
I'm sure it came
for
with
sure.
many other headaches beyond that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I've never sailed through a storm like that ever. It was honestly, the first summer of COVID was probably the worst experience I've ever had working. But we tacked well. Like even through COVID, like COVID didn't really end until 2022, I think. And by that time, I'd managed to pay off the restaurant's debt. Like we were free and clear 3.5 years in, which was 1.5 years ahead of schedule. And I thought that was pretty awesome, considering most of that was through COVID. You know,
that's amazing.
People supported the restaurant like crazy. People came out and bought takeout like crazy. And then when we reopened, people came. So it was pretty special. It's a pretty special little joint.
You know, I think, given that we're talking about creativity, I mean, we'll talk about food in a bit, but I think there was something, like you said, there was something sort of like very lacking and missing from the Penticton dining scene.
Yeah.
Or just the out and about scene that was missing inspiration. Like we had a lot of kind of bougie places. I wouldn't even say a lot, but there were some bougie places to go.
Yeah.
There were some old fashioned kind of, you know, well-trodden places to go that were also excellent.
They're very good.
Yeah,
they're very good.
But it was missing that sort of like that inspired, like bootstrappy, scrappy, entrepreneurial design sense that was a little more modern, that required a little more like chutzpah to like, you know, just get it going. And I think like Trado really brought that. And I've seen, you know, similar to your next restaurant, this where we're sitting, but other places as well that kind of also brought that spirit with them. And I think
Wayne and Frida,
you can feel
example.
the energy there. Right. And it's
Elma, great example
like you
of
can
that.
Pour money into something and build a beautiful room or whatever, but it doesn't have, there's something about when you just have to like cut plywood by yourself, you know, string it, make a wine rack, figure it out, all those things. Like you can feel that when you go into a space, and Trado immediately was like, wow, this is so cool. And then on top of that, value for the money was great and still is great. And it's, you know, that's something that's going to be fine when things are good. And when things are a little down and things are a little harder economically, it's still a place you can go. And so, I mean, I think people appreciate that.
I hope so. We've my experience with people talking to me when I first moved here eight or so years ago was that the struggle was the winter. I mean, it was easy to make money in July and August, but you had 8 months of the year, 10 months of the year to contend with after that. How are you going to survive that? I mean, it's very difficult to build a business around 2 months. It doesn't matter how good they are, you know, and you can have a huge space and have it full, but if you can't staff it properly, then the experience is horrible. And that was one of the things we noticed actually at going to certain winery restaurants, and that was that the service was just not very good. And we were like, this is crazy. Like, this is a lot of money. Like, these people have got a lot of money going on here, but their service isn't very good, which is another idea for business, which is just to train people and bring back the trade to what we do, the trade elements to it, that there is an education that you need to have in order to do this kind of work. And you need to be cut from a certain cloth to do it. Like there's certain people that cannot do this work. They just like emotionally, spiritually, everything else. It's like, oof, cannot do this work. But once you're cut from that cloth, if you're then trained up, then you can actually provide a very, very high standard of service with relatively minimal effort in the end. But it wasn't really, we didn't really see it. Like when we were visiting and when I talked to other people, you didn't really see it. And one of the things I had, what people would say, worry about the winter, and the summer will take care of itself. And a very good friend of mine is a wine importer, said, if you build it for the locals, the tourists will come. And so that's what we did. In my mindset for Trato, in my mindset for Chulo, the idea is that these are local hangouts and tourists will come. We know that. But what we want to do is make it accessible, at least somewhat, and raise the bar a little bit too, and sort of offer things a little bit that are a little bit harder to pronounce than a burger and fries, right? And we got lots of great restaurants that do that. And so adding another one didn't seem to make much sense to me. And my background is sort of upscale fine dining or upscale casual dining. I worked at Quattro on 4th restaurants. I worked at La Terrazza in Vancouver and Gusta di Quattro. I worked at a bunch in Toronto as well, Soto, Centro. And these are very upscale restaurants where pastas even 25 years ago were $40. And to me, that's a crime. But that's what they have to charge to provide that kind of room. And I wanted to sort of take the fine dining element out of it and offer the same service in a casual way, so that you wear, as I'm fond of telling my servers, you wear your fine dining on the inside and you only bring it out when it's time. So when the plate goes down, when the coffee cup goes down a certain way, that's when it comes out. When somebody asks you a question, that's when it comes out. And as a result of that, we've built this crew that works at Trato and Chulo that have these elements ingrained. And as a result, the service is very good. And as a result, we don't see the disparity in the winter like other restaurants have in the past. Our disparity is it drops to about 50% or 60% of what we do in the summer. And that's really good, considering from what I heard, it was 25% or 30% of what people were doing in the summer.
I think a big part of that too, though, I mean, you had well-designed spaces, but sort of appropriate size spaces for year round.
Yeah.
Whereas I found when I moved here, some of the issues were like you'd go into a restaurant that was the size of a football stadium.
Yeah.
And they built that for August long weekend or
Yeah.
for July long weekend and in the summertime. And even in the summer, it wasn't full, but they expected to fill this thing up for 2 months of the year. And that was that mentality. And I think the problem with that is that nobody wants to go to an empty restaurant.
No.
And when you are in even if they were busy in the winter, it was so big that it just felt empty and it felt kind of soulless and vacant, right?
Yeah.
And so when you go to a place like Trato, even if it's half full, which often it's full, and you can't get in anyway, but that's where you want to go. You're like, oh, there's people here. Let's go there. You're not going out to eat by yourself in solitude. Like it's so having a space that is inviting both by like design and warmth or whatever, but also by the size of it and the amount of people in it.
Yeah.
Appropriate. And being busy all year round, then people want to go there all the time. It's great.
Yeah. It's true. The design of the kitchen at Trato was built with that in mind, that the oven actually faces the entrance so that when people walk in, they see the entrance to the oven right in front of them. That the oven is like front and center. Like that is the showcase of what it is we do. So it needs to be there. Also, having open kitchens to me is very important. First of all, it makes cooks behave, who are notorious for not behaving. So it actually makes them behave a little bit better. But also it gives them a chance to see firsthand what their craft does to people. So when they put up that food that's going to a table and they can watch that person eat it and they watch the reaction of that person, they have a visceral relationship with that customer pretty much, from a distance even, or across the bar, like talking to somebody across the bar. And that experience is it's hard for certain cooks to adapt to, because you're a cook for a reason. And one of those reasons is that you don't want to talk to people, but it also does a whole lot of things to the restaurant in terms of how it changes the vibe of the restaurant too. One is that people see the effort that goes into what happens when you order something, that it's not just simply, taken out of the fridge and delivered to you, or there's some mystical thing that happens in the back. But when they actually see this ballet of 4 people moving very quickly and precisely around a kitchen, while somebody's waving a stick with really hot embers on it or whatever, and you see the number of comments I get from people who watch that happen and go, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen, is to watch these guys move. So it changes the customer's perspective of how the dining experience. It changes the employees' perspective of the dining experience, and it brings that all together into a community. And that's also part of the reason why I think Trato is so popular in that regard. I mean, some people don't like it, and that's fine. And we are very specific. And in fact, one of the hills that my partners just died on was the fact that we have Neapolitana in our name. And I was so adamantly against that because it meant that we couldn't do anything else. And if we found, for whatever reason, that we needed to tweak our pizza and make it more a New York in style rather than Neapolitan style, we can't do that if that name is on the building. They died on that hill, and I acquiesced. And we are now we are a Neapolitan pizzeria. And this is the way we make our food. And some people just don't like that. And there's nothing I can do about that anymore. But we just try and win people over one person at a time. With Chulo, it was a little bit of a different kind of story, and I think is a little bit more avant-garde for Penticton. But the results have been very good with people coming in. Like our reviews look like they were written by our family. It's a little bit. It's quite astonishing how people gush about it, and I think it's very, very complimentary. But it looks like it was written by a family member almost, because is that a real person, or did they actually eat there?
What's the catch?
What's the catch here, man? And I think it's just part of it is I think that the experience at Chulo, like Trato, is one of quite casual, high-end intimacy, like very good experience with the food, very good experience with the service, and a room that you cannot escape from. Like the server has nowhere to go. The kitchen staff has nowhere to go. Like this is the whole place. And so in order to get out, they have to go outside. So every now and then you'll see a staff member just go outside. And that's just so they can get away for a second and then they're back in again. Summertime, not very helpful. Wintertime, a little more helpful, but it's colder. But it's it has that really quite a visceral experience of a dining. I use that word because it's to me, that word means sort of in my blood.
And I have to say, when Trato first opened and beyond, that was for me, I immediately loved it. I mean, I spent 3 or 4 days eating pizza for every meal in Naples. And I was like, I'm going to find the best. I'm going to decide, like, I'm going to be the ultimate pizza reviewer of Naples. I'm going to eat every single place that I can get to while I'm here. And I got so sick after 4 days, but not like sick, but it just, pizza's amazing, but you probably shouldn't eat it for every meal for 4 days. Maybe you need some other things.
Yeah. A little variety. Yeah.
But my daughter, who's now, 8, but she was probably 3 when we started going to Trato, right? It's been 5 years or so.
Yeah. 5 years.
So she's about 3 years old. And one of her favorite things was to sit at the bar and watch them make pizza. I mean, who doesn't love watching somebody make pizza, and to be able to sit there with your child and have this experience around food? And it would just be her and I that would go do that. Yeah. And it was just such a wonderful time. And I mean, the cooks were all super nice to us, and they put on a show for her. It was great. Yeah. And that's still like, I think now that we're all talking about core memories because of this Disney movie, it's a core memory for her. Just put that ball up there. And and that changes your relationship as a child with food. Yeah. I mean, we probably came from I don't know what your family was like, but I came from a bit of a casserole generation. For part of my upbringing. I mean, my mom did put in a good effort in a lot of other ways, but it was just a lot of like tray dinners. And so to like see where your food comes from, to see somebody make it like that, and, in that environment and where everybody's happy and socializing. And I don't know, it's just such a cool experience for a child.
I agree completely. There's, we actually 2 points to that. One is my background is theater. And before I was in restaurants, I was in theater, which is not the direction that goes.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So I was an actor for most of my life. I was started I did my first professional show and my first TV show at around 9 or 10, and then did amateur stuff until I went to theater school, and then was a professional actor. And then I got out of acting in order to go back to school. And the only way I felt I needed to do that was to become a waiter, which I'd never done before. So I actually went from, normally you're a waiter until you make it as an actor. And I was an actor, and then I quit acting and became a waiter, which is not, the way things go. But in order to do that, I had to act like a waiter. So I learned my lines, and I did the research, and I learned what I needed to learn about being a waiter without having any experience in it whatsoever. And I managed to get a job in a fine dining restaurant in Vancouver without anybody knowing that I was a fraud. And I told them about it 2.5 years later. And the look of shock was quite audible, because by that time I had taken over the wine program as their assistant sommelier. I was doing their entire library, which was like $1.5 million worth of wine. And they just couldn't fathom that I had no experience in this before. And I was like, yeah, well, just acted like a waiter until I was one. And since that's the sort of my experience with food prior to that was not crazy. So becoming from an actor's family, weren't wealthy. We didn't have a lot of money. So the food was fairly simple, and not a lot of eating out. Right. And what eating out there was often McDonald's if there was an option to try it, because that was considered, where I was from, to be something to aspire to. And I didn't learn about food until I went to Europe, and then I got into restaurants after that.
So many things about you make so much more sense now. I had no idea about any of that.
So when I think about things, that's kind of what influences my choices, is the theatricality of what I do and what I get other people to do for me. Often, sometimes against their will, a little bit, some resistance, but that there is that's the theatricality of what restaurants do is as important in my mind, in my belief, as the food that gets put down. And in fact, you can only make food so well before it becomes in itself an art form. And I can't do that. I can't do that. Like what Grant Achatz does down at Alenia in Chicago, what they do at French Laundry, or El Bulli used to do. I can't do that. I wouldn't know the first thing about doing that. I would know the first thing about how to present it. I would understand that. I could theatrically present. I could produce and direct that, but I can't actually make it. With Trado, I can make it. Our food is not hoity-toity. We just do what we do really well, and we just try to keep doing that. So that was the first bit. The second bit is regarding children. I have 2 boys that are 10 and 12 now, but their relationship with food is forever influenced by me and my wife. And we have a very strong relationship with food. And one of them is in a huge resistance phase right now, won't eat anything. And the other will try anything. And currently his favorite thing is gilda, which is a pincho that we serve here of olive, white anchovy, and papira pepper, which is spicy, pickled, salty, and quite frankly, a very adult kind of flavor. And he just eats them like crazy. It's his favorite thing. And his buddy has had the same experience. Whereas his buddy's sister, who's the same age as my eldest, is in the same position. She's a bit more resistant to food, just a bit more resistant, which is kind of strange.
Isn't it kind of magic though when kids get that sort of adult taste bud for one thing or something?
I think it's astonishing, really. And my eldest has a relationship with olives that is quite profound. He adores olives, and he can name them, like Cerniolo, and he can name them, and which I find fascinating. But he loves olives, and I think that's amazing. When he was in grade 2, his teacher reached out to me right before COVID shut down and said, would you be interested in doing some kind of a cooking thing with our grade 2 class? We were going to make a field trip out of it. And I said, sure, we can talk about fermentation, not in a grade 2 way. talk about fermentation and making bread, and they can make bread, and then we can cook them lunch, and they can have pizza. And then I said, well, how's that? She was, that'd be great. So she brought in the class, and my son, my eldest, was in it. And we did this cooking class, and the kids went bananas. Like, they just thought this was crazy fun. Like, they couldn't get over it. Well, this is a good idea. And then COVID happened and it shut it down. Right. Wow. So for about another year passed, and we were shut down in the second year. And then the third year, the teacher reached out to me again. By this time, my other son was in her class. And she said, can we do it again? And I was like, sure, absolutely. So we did it again. And I said, can you pass this around? Because I think this is a really good idea. Like, I'll try to make it better. Like, I'll try to develop it so there's more to talk about and things like that. But I think that kids need to have more of that kind of experience with fire and with cooking and with, how we build things in food. I think it's very important. And so she did. And I got reached out to by another class, and then they bus in, and they show up at 10, and we do like cooking for an hour and talk about dough and mixers and equipment and how to behave in the kitchen, and and we talk about fermentation, and we talk about the changes of state, whether it's physical or chemical. So there's educational value to it. And then they make bread, and then they eat the bread with peanut butter if they want, or they just tear it and eat it because it's delicious. And then we make them pizzas, and they sit down and have pizza, and then off they go. They're back. And this is, and the Oliver teacher reached out and said, how much is it? And I said, it's free. Well, it's not free. You have to get here. So they have to pay for the bus. You guys have to do that. But as long as you get here, this is free. Like, we do this for nothing. She said, that's incredible. Why would you do that? And I said, you'll find out by the end. I said, there's method to the madness. I mean, it's part of it is altruistic for sure, a little bit, but part of it is not. Part of it is selfish. And the reason for that is that we get kids interested in food. But if a kid has a good time with our pizza, they go home and they tell their parents. And their parents say, well, let's go. And then they come to the restaurant and they have an experience in the restaurant. So we actually are training our next group of customers, basically, to get involved with food or taste food that isn't necessarily what they have at home.
That's cool. I mean, food, obviously there's every business needs to make money. There's that in everything, but there is that level of altruism, and there is like a next level thing. And to do that as a service to the community, because maybe like 5 of those kids are going to come in, like, who knows? Or maybe
we don't know.
Maybe
they all come in, maybe they don't.
But
they all have a great experience. And even if they don't, like, there's kids who don't like the pizza. Like, when it's actually served to them, they don't like the tomato sauce.
It's not from there.
It's
not the takeout kind they're used to.
No, and it's not, it might be that, or it literally might be the flavors are just not right. Like, and that's a thing. Fior latte as a cheese, if it's a mozzarella, it's a very benign taste, but it is a very textural thing. So if the kids if it doesn't jive, it just doesn't jive. And that's fine. That's fine. But then now they know.
But you do have, I love this part of your menu, having eaten many Italian pizzas in Italy, the sacrilege section, which to me, when I saw that, I was like, I immediately, I lived in Tuscany for 3 months with a family that's from Toronto. They're Italian Canadian. They invited me to live with them, and I was kind of in a transitionary point in my life. So I lived there, and we made pizza every Monday night at this like agriturismo. And I've been back to that town many times since, and I've adopted an Italian aunt a little bit by force. Like, she has to have me. Like, that's how it is. She's the best food I've ever eaten. Don't tell my mom. And, but just wonderful experience. But yeah, they are so passionate about the ingredients and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and when you can get a cappuccino and what goes on your pizza and blah, blah, blah. But so when I went to Toronto for the first time and saw the sacrilege section, because, I'm going to say, even with all that experience, I still like me a ham and pineapple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I took a picture of that and sent it to all my Italian friends and was like, this is amazing. And of course they all had an opinion about it, but
of course,
but it's great.
Yeah. No,
lean into it.
That was my partners came up with that. There's a story about that Hawaiian pizza, because I was very resistant to it. The double pepperoni, I was like, okay. But the ham and pineapple was, and it's not that I don't like Hawaiian pizza. I think it's great. I just didn't want it on the menu, because I didn't want the menu to be there in that place. That kind of, it's kind of, it's not the right thing. Like, we've got things like gorgonzola and honey and prosciutto and in the bee sting, we've in chili, and we've got like the ricotta and dates and onions and arugula with ricotta pizza and whatnot. All these different pieces and all of our, you know, our staples that come out of Naples, kind of the idea of salami and olives, like simple pizzas. And I said, you know, we had that section. Then we had the, you know, our section, which was mainly my recipes for the most part. And then we had the sacrilegious section. And my partners were like, no, we're doing this. And I said, well, can I do this to the pizza? Can I take the Hawaiian and can I change it? Can I roast the pineapple for starters? Can we roast the pineapple so that it gets caramelized a little bit and has a different kind of flavor? Can we add chili? Can we use a different ham? Can we use a different, you know? And they were like, no. It has to be this pineapple from a can. It has to be this ham. It has to be done this way. And I was like, oh my God. And I was so devastated. And about a year and a half after that, the penny dropped for me. And it was about approachability. And that when people come to the restaurant and they see words like caciocavallo and they see words like, even words like gorgonzola, or they see words like fior di latte, or they see the burrata, it's off-putting when you're in a town. And I forget that because I don't have that experience. But when you're from a town, even if you're moved away and come back, it doesn't matter, because you're just not exposed to that kind of stuff sometimes. And so that brings everything down to earth. Those two pizzas ground the menu, really. They make it real. And people will order it partly because they don't want to order any of this hoity-toity crap. They want to order something that they understand and something that they know is going to be good. And it is good. And so they enjoy that. And then maybe they come back and maybe they try out something else. But it basically grounds the restaurant. And that I will never disparage that Hawaiian again as a result, because I think that that's the pizza that actually translates the menu for everybody and makes it friendly, which is why it's there. It sits under the sacrilegious section because if you ask any Italian at all, they will literally throw a book at you, literally not the book, but any book, and say you must not put pineapple on a pizza. But they call it a Hawaiian, but I think it's from Manitoba. I think it's actually from Winnipeg. I could be wrong about that.
Cold weather place.
It's a cold weather place, dreamy pizza. And some guy created this, and it is a Canadian pizza, like full stop. So there's no question not having it.
Oh, there's like a whole thing to unpack about that. I can't stop smiling thinking about this because
it was a huge deal.
Oh, but also, I mean, it's brilliant though. I mean, kudos to all of you for running with it, but for a family's sake that maybe doesn't have experience with Neapolitan pizza, it's great because it does make it more approachable. Putting it in the sacrilege section immediately acknowledges that many Italians are going to find this as the bastard pizza.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And then on top of that, shows you have a sense of humor, which is, I think, I don't know, the whole thing, you're right. Lightning in a bottle. It's great.
Yeah.
Some of the ingredients you kind of went through on the pizzas are also kind of not totally traditional either. Of course, there's the traditional Neapolitan style pizzas that are on there, but like some of the local ingredients, some of the other things that you're pulling into the mix, pizza's kind of like in some weird way, like a blank canvas if you don't get too wrapped up in the tradition of it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about just the creativity around food and
We have a different group of chefs than we've had before in the restaurant. That's brought their own kind of experiences to it. One of them is from Halifax. The specials have been opened up to all members of staff. So any member of staff can come up with a special for a week and we'll run that special. It goes through our chef, Steve Ramey, first, and he will tweak it if it needs to be tweaked. But generally speaking, we've been pretty out there. I mean, more out there than we should be for a Neapolitan pizza. We have a box about yay big to work within, and anything that drifts outside of that is like, And so when somebody comes up with a donair pizza, that's way outside the box. Now that pizza sold like hot damn, it sold like crazy because people came in and it was a donair and they ate it and it tasted like a donair and it was delicious. And it was delicious. It was amazing.
I don't doubt it.
It was so good. But that can't make it onto the menu. Like that would never make it onto the menu. And it can't, because we are a Neapolitan pizzeria. And while we've taken our first section and made that about things that are from Naples, our second section sort of drifts outside outside a little bit, but definitely stays within the box of what we're doing. And then the sacrilegious pizzas, of course, fall into that since that box. And a lot of the specials are now drifting towards that. And so when it comes to the creativity around the food, a lot of it is taking something that's already and re-examining it slightly. So, for example, there's a thing in a pickled salad in Italian culture called giardiniera, which is like mixed vegetables that have then been lightly pickled, and it's just to keep them longer. Usually, you serve it as a side. It's usually served as an antipasto, right? And we serve it with the burrata, and burrata was I use the term Columbus, which is discovered when it was already there by a bunch of people. Yeah. So it was, burrata has had a resurgence in popularity in the last 15 to 20 years because of restaurants in New York and Vancouver and Toronto, all rediscovering this Pulian cheese, which is so delicious. And a few restaurants in Texas have switched gears, and that's now what they do. They make burrata as part of their staple and as part of their menu every day. So you order burrata fresh, and they make it for you, and then you eat it, which is extraordinary, I think. But there's when we're serving something like burrata here, where people aren't really don't have the experience of the cheese, we make our own. We wanted to serve a side with it, so we have prosciutto and we have bread, so it becomes an assembly of things. It's a deconstructed dish, and we wanted to have a vegetable, and we've tried a few things, but our chef came up with this giardiniera, which I was like, no, because when you get it in a vat, and it's really awful, and it doesn't taste very good. It's really sharp. So he just did his own version of it, and he uses whatever we have at the time. So in the wintertime, it's more root vegetables and chickpeas and things like that. In the summertime, there's other things sort of make their way in, and you have this sort of change. But the pickle itself is the most interesting part. So he's actually able to do it a 2-to-1 pickle and change the acidity of that salad and make it sweeter or make it spicier. And it just changes the texture of everything. So this is where we get kind of creative, really. Like we'll take tiramisu, and I was like, well, we'll do a tiramisu, but let's do one with limoncello and Earl Grey tea instead of coffee and marsala. And the result is awesome. Like it's delicious. It's not like a lemon flavor. It's very gentle because limoncello is quite a gentle lemony flavor.
Yeah.
But you get the essence of the Earl Grey coming out in it too, because that's what the cookies are soaked in. And it was a wonderful sort of departure from a traditional tiramisu, which is actually from the north of Italy. It's not from where our food comes from. And now we've taken a northern dish and done it with limoncello, which is definitely where our food comes from. So limoncello comes from Campania, comes from Positano, comes from that area. So we've taken a dish from the north and made it Neapolitan. Yeah, Naples is pretty extraordinary. Like Italy is pretty extraordinary with what it's managed to inundate the world with, considering the size of its country.
I love Naples so much. That was one of those places that when I was in Tuscany living, everyone's like, don't bother going to Naples. It's dangerous. It's this, blah, blah, blah. It's dirty. Mm-hmm. I went and I loved it. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but it was so cool and just so edgy and gritty. And, I really loved Barcelona in the sort of mid 2000s. It was still a little edgy and creative and funky. And
that's when I was there too. I was there in the early 2000s.
I've been back like all the way up until pretty recently, and it's changed. It's become a little posh, like a little more like there's a lot of cafes with subway tiles all over the place. And just like they've been infiltrated by tourism. And I mean, that's all the talk in the news now. But, I felt that coming for years. And it's just a different kind of city. It's still a wonderful place, but it's got, it's sort of lost its edge. Whereas you go to Naples or you go to Mexico City or, there's cities that still have like a real grit to it. Yeah. And in Naples, I feel like too, maybe it's the temperature or the temperature of the food. but people are like really fired up about stuff, and they're,
Yeah.
they're out in the street yelling at the guy across the street about the soccer game,
Yeah.
and they're just on fire about everything. You go to the post office, somebody's like yelling about
Something else. Yeah. No, it
That's
is
why their food's so good.
That's why, yeah. The best pats I ever had was cooked by the angriest man I've ever met. And old pasta cook at Gusto. And he was a Polish guy. He was a ferocious man, like just ferocious. He loved me for some reason. I don't know why, but we got along great. But his pastas were just so tight and consistent. Same every time. Perfect every time. He would put 4 pastas on a dish because it was a platter, and those sauces would never touch. Like, it would be a bowl and the pasta sauce would not touch. Like that. No, I've never seen anybody do that consistently, time in, time out, and and do such a good job of it. And his food always tasted perfect. It always tasted good. Angry man. Angry man. And I think, and it was just that ferocious, he was Polish. I used this ferocity to him, this sort of edginess to him, but it translated real well. It really did.
I owe pretty much how my life is, all the good parts of it at the moment, maybe outside of my job, but my family and my partner and everything, to a sandwich made by a very grumpy man. So I can totally appreciate where that's coming from, but it was meticulous.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be on a food level that becomes art for it to be as profound. And in fact, some of the most profound experiences in food generally are, I think, for a lot of people, are the ones that come from the most unlikely places. It's not about going to a big place like Alinea and having that 21, 24 course meal with all the different twills and all the different flavors. That can be amazing in its own right, and theater, in fact, in its own right. But it's going to that shop that you didn't expect, where you had that slice, or you had that sandwich, or you had that meal, that steak at that diner. What were they doing that there? That makes no sense to me. But that was the most amazing steak I've ever had. There was a diner in Toronto called the Tulip. I don't know if it's there now. It was there when I was at school in early 2000s at U of T. That was when I was doing my second degree. But it's and it's been there for years. Like it was an old taxi cab hangout. But the guy who owned it was this. I don't know anything about him other than his undying passion for beef. And he butchered his own sides. He aged them himself, and it was a steakhouse, but it was open at 5 a.m. for the cab companies. And it was open all day, and you could go in at any time, and you could order a 26-ounce porterhouse. 26-ounce porterhouse. It's like that big. It's a pound and a half of meat, and you could order a 14-ounce club cut tenderloin, and he served it with 2 slices of tomato, 2 slices of onion, raw, white onion, and 2 scoops of mashed potatoes, and the steak. No sauce. That's it. And at the time, it was like $28, which is unheard of. A 14-ounce tenderloin at a restaurant, any restaurant that was worth its salt, would be in the high 60s. This was $28, and it was the best steak I've ever had in my life. And I went back numerous times, and it has always been the best steak I have ever had, ever. And on the most unlikely places, at Coxwell and Queen, right by the cab companies, where the cab shop is, Yellow Cab and Checker, and it's right where they change the Coxwell's, right where the streetcar turns around. There's a streetcar lot there too. It's not a neighborhood in that way, and it didn't matter what you ordered; it was all good. And they had pies. Their pies were a mile high. They served like huge slices of like lemon meringue pie and chocolate cream pie and coconut cream pie, banana cream pie, that kind of thing. But it was like a diner. It was a diner. Like it, full stop. It was a diner, except that the steaks were the best steaks you would ever have in your life. Like just hands down. That was my first real experience with any kind of real food that was really good.
I guess on that note, one can hope that someday, there's a kid that's sitting there in Trato eating the greatest pizza of his life or her life or their life, and is going to start bringing their high school mates and their uni friends
That's what I'm hoping.
and their parents. They're going to come back there someday and go, this was the best pizza I've ever had.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a huge experience for them.
I'm hoping that we're at 5 years now, and 5 years is kind of a hiccup for restaurants. It's kind of that point at which you think you're doing real well, and you can, let your shirt, unbutton the top button and let it go a touch. And so right now I'm trying very much to keep an eye on things, make sure that things at the standard that we've become accustomed to at Toronto as a staff is maintained, and that we don't get complacent, and that we continue to push a little bit.
I mean, I think you've done an amazing job with the restaurants you have, and I think what's coming sounds exciting too. So restaurants are so important for the community, just as a gathering space and for inspiration and for connection. And
they're non-denominational and non-political, right? So you can go in and have an argument, but it's about meeting that person there to have it. And it's a neutral ground.
Yeah, and it's a place to make memories, right? Yeah. And so thank you for that, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed it a lot.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Cheers. If you've watched any or all of the episodes of Creative X Community, thank you so much. You can find me online at Chris Stenberg on all the platforms, and thank you to TELUS STORYHIVE for making this podcast possible.